On a quiet afternoon at a gas station off Highway 40, a pack of Hell's Angels rolled in, and the whole place went silent. Grown men looked away. Parents pulled their kids closer. Only one person moved toward them, a 9-year-old girl with a backpack and messy hair. She walked straight up to the biggest biker, pointed at the ink on his arm, and calmly said her mom had a tattoo just like his. The rider's face drained of color. The older woman with the girl went from angry to terrified in 1 second flat. And in that tiny, awkward silence between them, it became clear this wasn't some cute mistake. This kid had just ripped the lid off a secret that was supposed to stay buried. Late afternoon, the gas station on the edge of town was doing what it always did. A few pumps, buzzing lights, cars rolling in and out. Inside the mini-mart, it smelled like coffee, chips, and cold air from the drink coolers. Daisy sat at the small table by the front window, 8 years old, sneakers not touching the floor, a cheap spiral notebook open in front of her. On one side of the page were math problems from school. In the margins, she had drawn the same thing again and again, a small heart with M+S inside. Across from her, Evelyn held a styrofoam cup of coffee and watched the pumps like it was her job. This was their routine on nights when Sarah worked late. Grandma picked Daisy up from school. They grabbed a snack at the station, then waited here until Sarah's shift at the EMS base ended, and she swung by to take them home. Daisy liked watching people come and go. Truckers with tired eyes, construction guys in dusty boots, moms with kids on their hips, teenagers buying energy drinks. Everyone stayed a few minutes, then rolled back onto Highway 40. The only thing that didn't disappear was the heart in her notebook. She barely noticed she was drawing it now. She had seen the real one once, high on her mom's chest near her shoulder, when Sarah's scrub top slipped while she was getting ready for a night shift. Same heart, same letters, M+S. Daisy had asked what it meant. Sarah had said it was from a long time ago and changed the subject. Evelyn's face had gone tight in that way that meant stop asking. After that, nobody mentioned it again. But the question stayed. Who was M? Why did Grandma sound angry when she talked about those bikers Sarah used to run with? Why didn't Daisy have a dad like other kids at school? No one gave her answers, so she kept the heart for herself, on paper, on steamy bathroom mirrors, on the fogged-up car window with her fingertip. Outside, a car pulled away from Pump 3, and a pickup took its place. The sky beyond the glass had started to dim. Daisy bent over her notebook again, pencil moving without thinking, starting another tiny heart in the corner of the page. That was when she heard it, a low rumble far out on the highway. Not one engine, but several, getting louder every second. The windows shook just a little. Evelyn's hand tightened around her cup. Daisy looked up at the doors as the sound of motorcycles rolled toward the station. Engines grew louder until they were right on top of the station, a low rumble turning into a hard shake in the glass. Then the first bike turned in. Daisy pressed closer to the window. 3 big motorcycles rolled up to the pumps, chrome and black paint and loud pipes. The riders wore black leather vests over shirts and jeans. On the backs was the same patch, a skull with wings and the words, Hell's Angels. Inside, the mood changed fast. A woman at the cooler stopped moving. A man at the counter slid his wallet back into his pocket. The cashier's hand hovered over the register keys. Evelyn's jaw tightened. "Oh, great," she muttered. Her fingers squeezed the styrofoam cup. Daisy felt the tension coming off the adults, but she didn't feel scared the same way. Not yet. she felt something else first: curiosity. The engines cut off one by one. The quiet after all that noise made it easy to hear the small sounds inside: the radio, the lights, Evelyn's slow breath. The bikers finished at the pumps, talked low to each other, then headed for the door. The bell over the entrance chimed when the first one came in. He held the door so the other two could catch it. They took up space just by walking: boots on tile, leather creaking, tattoos on their arms and necks. Most people looked away as soon as the men stepped inside, staring hard at shelves or phones. Daisy didn't. From her seat, she could see them clearly. One man walked a little in front of the others without trying, like they were used to following his lead. He looked older than the rest, maybe in his 50s. Broad shoulders, dark hair shot with gray, a face that looked tired more than mean. His vest was open over a black t-shirt. When he reached into the cooler for a bottled drink, his sleeve slid up just enough for Daisy to see the ink on his upper arm. A small heart. Her breath caught. Same shape, same simple outline. Inside it, 2 letters with a plus sign: M+S. For a second, she thought her eyes were seeing things. She blinked and looked again. It was still there, clear as the one on her mom's skin. "Daisy, eyes on your homework," Evelyn said quietly, still not looking at her. That warning tone again. Daisy didn't move. Her pencil rested on the page, tip pressed into the paper, forgotten. The rest of the store faded out. There was a man 10 feet away wearing the same secret she had been drawing for months. Daisy couldn't stop looking at the heart on his arm. It was the same shape she had been drawing in her notebook for months. Her chest felt tight. Before she could stop herself, she slid off her chair. Her sneakers hit the tile. Evelyn reached out and told her to sit down, but Daisy slipped past her hand and walked toward the coolers. The space between the table and the aisle felt longer than it really was. She could feel people watching her, even though she didn't look around. The man with the gray in his hair had his hand on the cooler door when he saw her coming. His fingers stopped on the handle. He turned his head, then his whole body, following this small girl in worn sneakers as she came closer. The other 2 riders saw her too. Their conversation stopped. The store went quiet except for the hum of the fridges and the buzz of the lights. Daisy reached the end of the aisle and stopped a couple of feet away from him. Up close, she could see the tattoo clearly. The lines weren't perfect. One corner was a little shaky, like it had been done in someone's kitchen, not a clean shop. But the shape was clear. A small heart. Inside it, M+S. Her heart pounded, but her voice was steady. "Hello, sir. My mom has a tattoo just like yours." The words came out louder than she expected. The woman at the cooler stopped moving. The cashier froze with a receipt halfway out of the machine. Behind her, Evelyn told her to come back, her voice sharp and scared, but Daisy stayed where she was. The man didn't answer right away. He looked at his own arm, at the heart on his skin, then back at the girl in front of him. Up close, his eyes were dark and steady. Not soft, not mean, just tired. Right now, they were wide with surprise. His jaw tightened once. "Just like mine," he said slowly. Daisy nodded and tapped her chest near her shoulder, where her mom's tattoo sat under her shirt. The whole store felt like it was waiting to see what he would do next. He went quiet after Daisy spoke. He looked at her, then at the small heart on his arm, then back again. Like he was checking this wasn't a mistake. When he asked for her mother's name, Daisy answered the way she did at school. Sarah Collins. His hand slipped from the cooler door. His jaw tightened. Behind Daisy, Evelyn moved fast. She grabbed her granddaughter's shoulder and tried to pull her back toward the table, ending it with the firm tone she used when something felt unsafe. He didn't raise his voice. In a flat, steady way, he said the girl wasn't bothering him and kept his eyes on Daisy while he asked if her mom worked nearby and what she did. Daisy said her mom rode the ambulances on Highway 40 and helped people from wrecks. He swallowed and asked if it was just Daisy and her mom at home. Daisy said it was mostly the two of them and that her grandmother lived with them for now. Evelyn's hand tightened. She stepped in harder, saying this conversation wasn't his business. This time, he turned from Daisy and looked straight at her. He said Evelyn's name as if it was familiar. The color left her face. Evelyn told him he had lost the right to say her name or step into their lives after all this time. He didn't answer in kind. He said he hadn't come looking for anyone, that he had stopped for gas, and that the only reason he knew they were here was that a little girl pointed at his arm and said her mom had the same tattoo and the name Sarah Collins. He said he wasn't there to drag anyone backward, and that he understood she had been scared back then. Then he reached into his vest and took out a plain business card, the kind you see on a parts counter, small bike shop logo and a phone number. He held it out and made it clear that if Sarah wanted to talk, she could use that number, and if she didn't, he would stay away. Evelyn stared at the card, then grabbed it and shoved it deep into her purse without a word. Before he left, he looked at Daisy again and told her she had been brave to walk over and that asking honest questions wasn't wrong. Then he tapped the heart on his arm and pointed to the spot on her chest where her mother's tattoo sat under her shirt. "Some things don't go away," he said, "even when people do." After that, he stepped back, and the store went back to normal on the surface, with people paying and moving again, and a small card now hidden in Evelyn's purse. The drive home felt slow. Daisy sat in the back seat with her backpack on her lap, watching the gas station fade in the mirror and then disappear. She kept thinking about the heart on the man's arm and how it matched the one on her mom's skin. Questions crowded her head, but every time she leaned forward, she saw Evelyn's tight face in the mirror and sat back again. In the front seat, Evelyn drove with both hands on the wheel. Her purse rode on the passenger side. She knew the card was in there somewhere under receipts and loose change, and she was aware of it at every stoplight. When Daisy finally spoke, it was only to ask if her grandmother knew the man with the tattoo. Evelyn cut the question off quickly and made it clear he was not someone Daisy needed to think about, and that some people from the past were better left there. After that, Daisy turned to the window and stayed quiet. At home, they moved through the usual steps, but it didn't feel like a normal afternoon. Daisy kicked off her shoes, dropped her backpack by the couch, turned on the TV, and stared at the moving pictures without really seeing them. Her mind kept drifting back to the gas station and the way the man's face had changed when he heard her mother's name. In the kitchen, Evelyn started a pot of coffee she didn't really want. Her hands were unsteady enough that she had to slow down to keep the spoon from shaking against the mug. When the coffee was done, she didn't pour a cup. Instead, she pulled her purse close, reached inside, and felt for the smooth edge of the card. She set it on the table. It was simple, just a small bike shop logo and a phone number. Even so, her heart picked up like it meant trouble. She stared at it for a few seconds, then slid her hand over it when she heard Daisy in the hallway. Across town, Sarah was still at the EMS base finishing reports, tired and unaware of any of this. She sent a quick message that she would be home late and asked if everything was okay. Evelyn answered with a short reply, saying they were fine, and put the phone face down. As the afternoon went on, Daisy went to her room early, saying she felt worn out. She lay on her bed and drew small hearts on the blanket with her fingertip, thinking about matching tattoos and how many things adults never explained. In the kitchen, Evelyn sat alone at the table with the card under her palm, knowing that one small number now tied their quiet house to a part of Sarah's life she had spent years trying to close. Sarah got home later than usual, still in wrinkled scrubs, feet sore from a long shift. She called out that she was back as she stepped inside. Daisy reached her first, sliding across the floor in socks and wrapping both arms tight around her waist. The hug felt different. It lasted longer and had a grip that made Sarah pause. She hugged back and felt the tension in her daughter's body. Daisy tried to act normal, mentioning their usual stop at the gas station like it was just another part of the day, but the words sounded forced. Evelyn came in from the kitchen, drying her hands on a towel that was already clean. She asked about work and moved on before Sarah could say much. Sarah gave a short answer and then looked past her mother at the counter. A fresh pot of coffee sat there with a mug beside it, untouched. Evelyn never left coffee sitting. The detail stuck in Sarah's head. She asked if everything was okay at home and got the same brief reassurance she had seen in the text earlier, the same phrase in the same flat tone. It did not match the full pot or the tight look on her mother's face. Daisy slid back between them with a rush of talk about the gas station, tossing in big motorcycles and vests like on TV, then cutting herself off. Evelyn stepped in fast, brushing off the whole thing as nothing more than bikers grabbing drinks and saying she did not want Daisy treating that kind of scene like fun. Sarah let the topic drop, but it stayed with her. Later, at the coffee table, she flipped through Daisy's notebook and saw the margins full again. The small heart with M+S sat in row after row, pressed darker this time. Her stomach tightened before she pushed her focus back to the math problems. Daisy went through brushing her teeth and getting into bed like always, saying she was tired. When she disappeared down the hall, Sarah walked back to the kitchen. Evelyn stood at the sink, rinsing a mug. The stack of mail on the table had been straightened, but looked like it had been shifted. Sarah asked again if everything was really fine, and got the same short line as before, plus a push to shower and sleep. She was too worn out to start a fight, so she went to her room. Behind her, Evelyn stayed in the kitchen, eyes on the envelopes, knowing the card from the gas station was under there, and that sooner or later Sarah was going to find it. The next afternoon, Sarah came home on a short break to shower and change before a night shift. She dropped her bag by the door and walked toward the kitchen. Evelyn was in the living room with the TV on low and a stack of mail on the table. Sarah set her keys down on that stack. They slid, bumped the edge, and knocked something loose. A small white card slipped out just far enough to show. She picked it up, meaning to tuck it back, then saw it was a plain card with a small bike shop logo and a phone number. No name, but her chest tightened as she looked at it. From the couch, Evelyn brushed it off as nothing, probably something that came with a receipt. The way she hurried the words made Sarah stop. She turned the card over. The back was blank. The front still felt wrong in her hand. She sat at the table, set the card flat, and asked where it had really come from and whether it was tied to the gas station Daisy had talked about. At first, Evelyn repeated the short story about bikers coming in for drinks and leaving. With more questions and longer pauses, the rest came out. One of the men had worn a vest Evelyn recognized from years ago. Daisy had not stayed in her seat. She had walked up to him, pointed at the heart on his arm, said her mom had the same tattoo, and given him Sarah's full name. The man had reacted like someone who knew exactly who that was. He had known Evelyn too, and the old life she believed she had pulled her daughter away from. Before he left, he had put the card on the table and made it clear, in simple terms, that if Sarah wanted to reach out, she could use that number, and if she did not, he would stay away. By the time Evelyn finished, Sarah's hands were flat on the table, and the card sat between them like a thin border. Anger rose without a clean target. Part of it went to the rider who had stepped back into their world, part to the mother who had kept this in her purse overnight, and part to the younger version of herself who had walked away from that life with no real goodbye. She thought about the night before, about hugging Daisy at the door while this card was already in the house, and nobody had said a word. Evelyn's only reason now was that she had been tired and had hoped it would feel smaller in the morning. It didn't. The card lay on the table, drawing Sarah's eyes more than the moving pictures on the muted TV screen behind them. That night, after Daisy was in bed and the house was quiet, Sarah sat at the kitchen table with the card in front of her. The TV in the living room threw light into the hallway with the sound off. The fridge hummed. A car passed outside now and then. Work was done, and there was nothing left to look at except the two people sleeping down the hall and the past she had pushed aside for years. The card was small and plain, just a bike shop logo and a number. There was no name, but she did not need one. She already knew who had handed it over. In her head, old scenes lined up whether she wanted them or not. She saw herself at 19 in a different parking lot, cheap jacket, shaky hands, watching a line of bikes roll in. Loud engines, smoke in the air, people stepping back. One rider with a grin that never quite left his face. On paper, he had been in trouble. To her, he had been the first person who made her feel seen. She thought about summer nights on the back of that bike, the road under the tires, promises about leaving town. Other pieces cut in that she had never shared with Daisy, fights that went too far, a crash and blood on the asphalt. Her mother was crying in their small kitchen, saying this life would eat her alive. At first, she had shrugged it off. Then she had seen enough hospital waiting rooms and police tape to know it was not just fear talking. When she found out she was pregnant, everything changed. There had been one especially bad night between the club and another group, flashing lights and the cold sense that someone was going to end up in a cell or a grave. Her mother put a bus ticket in her hand and told her she did not have to go back. This time she listened. She left town without telling him, changed her number, and followed her mother to a new city. Late nights at the clubhouse turned into late nights in classrooms and training, and then on the ambulance. For 9 years, she had given Daisy a simple story about her father, a loose outline about someone who had not stayed. She had never talked about hearts inked into skin at a kitchen table or rows of bikes under highway lights. Now her daughter had walked into a gas station, seen that same heart on a stranger's arm, and spoken her name with no idea what she was opening. The thought made Sarah's stomach twist. It was no longer just about a man she had left behind. It was about a girl who drew that symbol in the margins of her homework and who deserved more than half a story. Her fingers rested on the edge of the card. She thought about calling, about hearing his voice after all these years, about saying out loud that the child at the end of the hall was his. She also thought about doing nothing, about dropping the card in the trash and trying to seal the door again. She sat there for a long time with the number in front of her. In the end, she did not call, and she did not throw it away. She slid the card into the back of a drawer with spare batteries and old menus and closed it, knowing that the past was not gone. It was here, under her roof, drawing small hearts on school pages. 2 days later, Sarah opened the junk drawer, took the card out, and this time didn't put it back. She called the number, set a meeting, and chose a small diner off a different exit so it wouldn't touch the gas station or her EMS base. Evelyn stayed home with Daisy and didn't argue, which told Sarah enough. She arrived early, sat where she could see the door, and watched her coffee go cold. When he walked in, she knew him at once. Older, marked by years, but still carrying the same way of moving and scanning a room. He sat across from her, and they started with the past, because there was no way around it. He said he had gone by her old place after she disappeared and found it empty. Heard her mother had taken her and left town. Wanted to look, but knew dragging the club into it would only dump more trouble on her. He took her leaving as a sign she needed distance from everything he was tied to, and decided staying away was the only thing he could give her. She answered with her own flat truth. She talked about the fights, the crashes, the hospital nights, the last violent weekend, and the bus ticket her mother pressed into her hand. She admitted she had been pregnant and too scared to say it, that leaving without a word had felt like the only move that didn't end in police lights or a funeral. He didn't argue. He owned his part. The drinking, the blind loyalty to the patch, the way he had laughed off warnings until funerals blurred together. That crash, she remembered, had shaken him too, and over time, he had stepped back, spent more hours at the shop than at the clubhouse, and tried to steer younger guys away from the same mess. Only then did they talk about Daisy. Sarah laid out the dates and the math, even though both already knew what it meant. She sketched the years in simple strokes: a move to a new city, a birth, night shifts, daycare, small apartments. Then she gave him a few sharp details about the girl he had never met. Stubborn when something felt unfair, quick to stand up for smaller kids, fixated on the little heart on her mother's shoulder without knowing why. He listened with his hands around his mug and did not reach for big words or instant titles. Instead, he asked what place he had in the story Daisy had been told. Sarah said their daughter lived with a simple version about a dad who was gone and a life that worked without him, and that she had been careful not to turn him into a monster or a hero, just someone who wasn't there. From there, they moved to what came next. They agreed that Daisy's safety and stability would come first. The truth had to come from Sarah at home, in a quiet room, not from a stranger walking up to her at school. There would be no surprise visits, no big scenes. If, after hearing the full story, Daisy wanted to meet him, it would be on her timeline and in a calm place they chose together. If she said no, he would have to live with that. It wasn't perfect, but it was solid for two people who already knew what chaos could do. When she finally stepped back out into the parking lot, the fear she had carried to the diner was still there. But now it sat beside a thin layer of relief from finally saying out loud what she had held in for almost a decade. She drove home to the small house where a 9-year-old girl slept with notebooks full of hearts. The card in her pocket was no longer just something she had picked up at a gas station. It had become a line between the life she had built on her own and whatever careful, slow thing might come next if all three of them chose it. Sarah chose a quiet Sunday afternoon to tell Daisy the truth, a day with no plans and no rush. The week after the diner meeting, she watched her daughter closely, seeing the same small heart fill the corners of school pages, sometimes with letters inside, sometimes without. When the dishes were done and the TV was off, Sarah sat with her on the couch and, in plain words, told the story she had hidden for 9 years. Being young and scared, falling for a man tied to a rough world, staying through fights and crashes, then leaving when the violence came too close, and she was pregnant. She said the man at the gas station came from that life, that he had not known about the baby when she left, and that she and Evelyn had built a different home on purpose. Daisy listened, crying in some moments and asking short, blunt questions in others, more still than most 9-year-olds. When the main facts were out, Sarah told her nothing would happen unless she wanted it. Daisy did not decide that day. In the next few days, the story sat in the house like an extra object on every surface. It showed up in stray comments at breakfast, in the car, when a motorcycle passed them, and Daisy went quiet. She still did her homework, went to school, laughed at shows, but there was a heavier layer under everything. By midweek, she said she wanted to meet him once, with her mom there, in a place that did not belong to anyone's past. Sarah called him and kept it short. They chose a small park on the edge of town, with a playground and a row of picnic tables, open and public but calm. On the day they picked, the sky was clear and the air cool. Sarah and Daisy arrived first. Daisy wore her favorite hoodie and carried her notebook, but did not open it. Sarah's chest tightened whenever she heard a bike on the road beyond the trees. When he finally walked up the path, he wore jeans, boots, and a plain jacket, the same man but toned down. He stopped a few feet away and waited. Sarah introduced them in simple terms and then stepped back enough to let them talk. The next hour moved on to small, safe topics: school, the dog Daisy wanted, and small details about the park. When the talk drifted toward old days, he watched Sarah's face and shifted away. He did not act like a father who had earned that role. He brought no big gifts and made no promises. He answered Daisy's direct questions and stayed quiet when she needed time. At one point, she opened her notebook and showed him the little heart she had been drawing for months. He rolled up his sleeve just enough to show the worn ink on his own arm. The match was obvious without anyone naming it. Sarah watched Daisy compare the drawing and the tattoo and saw something change in her eyes. Not sudden joy, just the first sense that the space between her questions and reality was starting to close. They did not stay long. An hour was enough for a first meeting. Before they left, they agreed there would be no fixed schedule, only occasional meetings when school, work, and nerves allowed, and only if Daisy still wanted them. On the drive home, Daisy stared out the window, then opened her notebook and traced the heart again, adding a second one beside it. Not quite touching, but close. Back at the house, Sarah knew nothing had been magically fixed. There were still years to explain, boundaries to keep, and trust to build. But there was also something new, the beginning of a connection that belonged to all three of them, and a chance for this rough, careful version of family to grow out of truth that had come late but finally come. A few weeks after the park meeting, the next step was a simple dinner at home. No birthday, no holiday, just a weeknight when Sarah's shift ended early, Daisy's homework was light, and Evelyn could be there. Sarah kept it basic. She cooked her usual pasta, made a small salad, set out paper napkins, and wiped the counters more than she needed to. The goal was not to impress anyone. The goal was to see if they could sit at one table without it going badly. Telling Evelyn about the invite was the first wall. When Sarah said she wanted him there, her mother went quiet, then gave a short nod. No lecture, no yelling, just a tighter mouth and more cleaning. On the afternoon of the dinner, Evelyn straightened forks that were already straight and checked pots that did not need checking. Daisy moved through the kitchen, bringing plates, asking what time he would get there, trying to sound casual while clearly counting in her head. When the knock came, the house went still. Sarah dried her hands, looked at Daisy once, and opened the door. He stood there in a plain shirt and jeans, hands empty, no gifts, no club colors. Inside, the air felt cramped. The table that had always held 3 plates now held 4. The conversation started slowly and stayed small. Daisy talked about school and friends. Sarah mentioned work in broad strokes. He told simple stories about the shop. Passing bowls and plates forced eye contact and basic manners. Bit by bit, the room moved from stiff to just tense. The past still pushed in. He mentioned hearing sirens and wondering if they were tied to his people. Sarah admitted she still woke some nights, thinking she heard engines on a quiet street. Daisy watched the adults more than she spoke. The hardest shift was between him and Evelyn. For years, she had carried one clear picture of him: a young man on a bike pulling her daughter toward trouble. Now she had to deal with the man who took off his boots at the door and rinsed dishes at her sink. She did not trust him, but she stopped treating him like a ghost story. She asked blunt questions about drinking, about fights, about what he was doing with his life when Sarah left. He answered in short, direct sentences and did not try to make himself look better. Some of what he said was ugly. He did not pretend it was not. That straight answer worked better than any long speech. At one point, the talk shifted to Daisy's future. Middle school, maybe college. What kind of life did they want for her? 3 adults with rough histories all landed on the same simple thing. She deserved solid ground and clear choices. They did not agree on every detail of the past, but they lined up on that. By the time the dishes were washed and the leftovers were in the fridge, the room felt different. It was not warm or easy, but it was less sharp than at the start. Daisy went to her room and came back holding an old photo Evelyn had kept in a box. It showed Sarah as a teenager next to a bike, standing beside a man whose face now sat at their table. Daisy set the picture down between the 3 adults and sat back. For a few seconds, nobody spoke. The photo, the man at the table, the woman at the counter, and the girl in the chair all clearly came from the same story. They could not pretend they were strangers joined by an accident at a gas station anymore. Sarah did not feel peace or closure. What she felt was simpler. 4 people who had reasons to stay apart, choosing, for one evening, to sit in the same room, pass food, answer hard questions, and not walk out. It was not a clean ending. It was one meal. But it was the first time their past and their present shared a table without breaking it, and that was more than they had before. Over the next few months, nothing turned perfect. But life in the house stopped feeling like it might break. They never wrote anything down, but a loose pattern formed. Some Sundays, he met them at the park or a diner for an hour. Some weeks, they skipped because Daisy had a project. Sarah picked up an extra shift, or everyone just felt raw. He stayed inside the lines they had agreed on. He did not show up uninvited. At school events, he stood at the back and blended in with the other adults. Daisy kept it quiet. She did not talk about it at school. It stayed inside their house and in a few calm places around town. Some days she asked about his work and his past. Other days she barely spoke to him. He learned to accept both without pushing. Trust moved forward, stalled, slid a little, then moved again. Evelyn watched all of it. At first, she planted herself in the middle of every visit, listening for any sign of the old life coming back. Over time, she stepped back. She saw him show up on time, leave on time, answer hard questions, and drive away sober with his helmet on. She still did not like him, but she stopped using him as a simple warning story. He became a man she could not fully forgive and could no longer write off. For Sarah, the biggest shift was inside. The gas station off Highway 40 stopped feeling like a landmine. She could pass it in the ambulance or her own car and see it as one hard moment that also opened a different road. The heart on her shoulder stopped being just a mark from a bad chapter. It became a reminder that her life was messy and still hers. At home, small changes showed up on paper. Daisy's drawings shifted. The little heart with letters inside still appeared on notebook margins, but not in every corner. Sometimes she drew 3 simple shapes instead. One for her, one for her mother, one for the man who used to be a stranger at a gas station, and now knew her favorite ice cream and her teacher's name. Near the end of the year, they ended up back at that same gas station. Not as a big moment, just because the road put them there. Sarah pulled in for fuel after a late run. Daisy sat in the front seat, jacket zipped, watching a line of bikes parked off to the side. It was not his group, just another set of riders passing through. Engines rumbled, boots moved, and for a second, it looked like that first day. The difference was inside her. She looked at the riders, at her mother's shoulder, at her own hands. She understood more now about what patches and tattoos could mean. Danger, loyalty, bad calls, better choices, all mixed together. When they drove away, the station shrank in the mirror, but it no longer felt like the point where her life split in 2. It was just one stop on a longer road. Back at the house that night, she sat at the table with a blank page and drew 3 small hearts in a line, close but not touching. She did not label them. She did not need to. It was not a clean, finished picture of a family. It was a set of people who kept showing up, told the truth late but finally told it, and let the past sit in the story without letting it choose every step ahead.